Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashleigh and I'm one of the pastors here, and it is great to see you this morning. Today I'm going to be kicking off our new series called The Weary World Rejoices, where we'll be talking about Advent and the Nativity story and how God continues to work this story out in our lives today. And it's not just a cute little Bible story that we tell the kids to distract them from presents, and more presents, but it is a story that is filled with hope and joy and grace. Funnily enough, Hope, Joy and Grace are the middle names of mine and Tom's three little girls, and we purposely named them these names because we felt God calling us to remember these gifts as we bring them up whilst we manage their wildly different personalities, with sharing the truth of who God is in their lives, and that they get to hold on to these gifts so dearly because it means something, and that where there is difficulty and hardship and sadness and destruction in the world, they can hold on to the very real truth that God overcomes these things with hope and joy and grace. Next week is the beginning of Advent season, which is the lead up to Christmas. And we often think of Advent as a time of excitement and getting ready for Christmas, eating chocolate for breakfast from a wildly massive piece of plastic that may or may not share the story of Jesus' birth on it. But in the historic calendar, the Advent is the beginning of the new year. In the historic church calendar, I should say, sorry. And the word Advent means arrival, and it signifies the anticipation of Jesus' birth, but also it reminds us of how he saved us. And we take this time to prepare ourselves in remembrance to receive life that is offered in Jesus. In the liturgical, that's a mouthful, that one, history of the church, Christians would take the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas to consider what the year had been and to prepare for the new year to come. And they would consider the darkness of the world so that they could see the brightness of what is offered in Jesus. So I'm proposing a challenge to us all this Christmas, this Advent, and that we take time to consider all that is wrong in the world and all that is wrong in our lives. And we sit with that pain and that discomfort and we take it to Jesus. And we remember the hope that he's given us through his actions of self-sacrifice and love for us. It's quite a different way of thinking about Advent and how society says we should celebrate Christmas. You know, society says that these few weeks should be full of happiness and excitement and twinkly lights and cozy evenings and spending lots of money on our loved ones and some really cheesy Christmas songs as well. And the tradition of Christmas lights as well comes from when people would put their candles on their tree, which is a little bit dangerous, which is why they turned them to electric ones, thankfully. But that symbolised Jesus being the light of the world and where his light shines in the darkness. And we probably all have one of those neighbours who likes to try and light up the entire universe with Christmas lights on the outside of their house. And if Tom, would let me, I would be that person. I would definitely be the one to have the lights shining outside my house. But apparently we can't afford the electric bill. I have threatened him, however, with a blow-up nativity scene. I'm still working on it. Watch this space for next year. But one of my favourite things that happened when we were living in Walgrave is that every year, a guy in the corner, we kind of lived in you couldn't go past the end of the street. He would have a charity thing for putting up his Christmas lights. He would raise money for Cynthia Spencer and the British Heart Foundation. And these lights started off with just a couple of houses, his house and his next doors. And then the following year, it was all 3 houses on the end of the row. And then the next year, it was like a house on each end of the other side. And then by the 4th year that we lived there, it was like the whole end of our street. And it was fantastic. And we would have the most socially awkward light switch on the day that it was to switch on all these lights. And it would start with getting letters through the door in February to remind us about the following year's switch on. And we'd be reminded constantly throughout the year, whether it was March or April or May. And we would always have a snow machine that would turn into a slip and slide on the pavement. And one year he invited a police officer to do a speech, which she didn't know that she was supposed to be doing. She thought she was just there for fun. But despite the constant nagging all year round and having to buy a blackout blind just so that we could sleep at night, it was always really great fun and we loved it. Well, I loved it. Tom was a bit like, do we have to do this? I was like, yes, we do, because it's brilliant and the kids love it. So spirit, let's come on, Christmas spirit. But it would get us into the Christmas spirit, and it was always a light in the darkness of everything that was going on in the world around us and in our lives. But God actually calls us to consider the darkness in the world at Advent, to pay attention to what is wrong in the world, and to think about how darkness has entered in to the world and how there is pain and loss and fear and doubt and challenge and addiction. And our cultural tendency is to kind of smooth this over, put on our stiff upper lip and pretend that all is well with the world. But that's not a biblical tendency. The Bible is so desperately honest, and it's wrought with pain and wrongdoing and complaint and fear. And it calls us to really pay attention to our own suffering, so that the hope that is found in Jesus is suddenly meaningful to us. And it can also be tempting to fall into that toxic positivity trap where we're always looking for the silver lining and saying things like, but what I'm going through isn't anywhere near as bad as what they're going through, so I shouldn't really complain. But the Bible tells us that all of our pain, whatever you or I are going through, whether it's really as awful as what your friend is going through or not, it's all relative. And the pain that I feel is probably not how you would feel about this situation, but doesn't mean that I shouldn't feel the pain that I do feel. So in that, our reading for this series, The Weary World Rejoices, is no other than Habakkuk. It's a random one, isn't it? Also, apparently I'm saying this wrong, but according to Bible scholars and Tom, but I can't say it right, so it is Habakkuk still, okay? He can tell you the right way to say it when he talks on this series. And it might seem an odd book of the Bible to study for a series about Advent and the birth of Jesus. But as I said before, the Bible is very, very honest, and Habakkuk is a great example of this. Habakkuk is considered one of the minor prophets of the Bible, but one of the unique things about him is that he is one of the only prophets that brings his complaint directly to God. Often in the Bible, we see the prophets recognizing what's wrong with the world, talking to God about this, hearing from God in the situation, and then they challenge the people and they tell them how to be right with God and change their ways. But Habakkuk doesn't do this. He notices the corruption in the world and he sees the terrible things happening and he talks to God about it. Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 1-4 says this: the prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me, and there is strife and conflict abounds. Sorry, my iPad's doing a thing. Stop it. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. Do you ever look at the Bible and think, whoa, that's deep? Like, this person's suffering, and it seems a little bit over the top, some of these words. It's a little bit dramatic. The law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteousness so that justice is perverted. Years ago, when terrible things happened around the world, we wouldn't know about them for months because we weren't as connected as a world then as we are now. But we now learn about world events happening within seconds of it actually happening. We can see these horrific things unfolding as they happen through pictures and videos and news articles. And one world event that I really remember so clearly when I was growing up, watching unfold, was the collapse of the World Trade Center. I remember walking into my sister's classroom at lunchtime and seeing everybody huddled around this tiny little TV in the corner, watching this unfathomable thing happen right there and then. And another event not so long ago was George Floyd. People actually videoed the situation as it was happening. They filmed this poor man dying, and it was then uploaded to Facebook, of all places. I personally refused to watch it because I just thought it was not honourable to him or his family, or respectful, and I didn't want to give that video any more airtime. But these days we're constantly taking in the world's pain every single day, all at once, all day long. And psychologists actually say that our bodies and minds are not meant to, and they're not built to take in this kind of pain. And it's detrimental to us and our mental state. I personally had to stop watching the news about 12 years ago because it was just too much. I was getting news articles pop up on my phone. I was getting a ping about this really awful thing that happened. And then 5 minutes later, there was another ping about something else that's really awful that's just happened. And it just really got to me. And I'm the kind of person who really takes on other people's pain. I can feel it in my own body, like it's my own pain. Don't worry, I do work on this. I don't carry it. So just putting that out there, that little disclaimer. But I had to stop watching it, and I had to get Tom to make an agreement with me that if something big happened in the world, he would read about it and look it up and figure it out, and then let me know. And I would promise not to read about it myself, but he would update me, just because it made me so desperately sad and I didn't know what to do with that pain. So not just the pain of the world, but what about the pain in our own lives, or the pain in the lives of our friends and our family? You know, as a church, we've been through a pretty tough and testing time as we've seen some really beautiful and special people pass away. A very dear family racked with cancer, and other friends in our church family suffering with cancer and lifelong debilitating health problems. How do we manage that pain? I would say that it's worth being honest with God about your pain. It's what we see in the Bible. Sit with those feelings, let them come, and just let them be. Don't try to brush them off with the empty little platitudes. Just feel them and be honest with God about them. How long, Lord, must I call for your help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. Those words don't sound quite so over the top anymore, do they? If we think about how desperate and in pain Habakkuk was with the situation going on in the world around him, and we take that and we think about our own pain, he's being honest about the pain he's feeling. And the next paragraph in the book is God answering him and saying, yeah, I'm with you, son. It's painful and it's dark and these people are making a massive mess in the world. And I know it looks like I'm not doing anything about it. And it will look like that for a long time to come. But trust me, I am with you. I have got you. And I love you. It's worth pausing and asking yourself, what's my complaint? What do I struggle with? What's hard for me? And then most importantly, how do I bring that to God? Personally, I've been struggling for a little while now with the difficulties of life, seeing my friends suffer in the most horrendous way, watching my granddad suffer, having surgery myself, looking after my daughters and supporting them where life is difficult for them, supporting my husband who's getting tired and worn out, and I actually sent him away on a retreat this week just to stop him whinging. I'm joking. The retreat was real, just the whinging wasn't. And just feeling tired and worn out myself, looking after church and working in retail alongside it all, taking on an extra shift for Christmas, and as well as taking on the kids and youth work in the last few months in church. It's been a lot. And I've been asking God lots of questions about what's the point? Am I doing the right things? Am I getting it right? Where do I fit in all of this? And it's been quite tough and quite painful. But I knew I needed something more, and I knew I needed some help in asking those questions to make sure that I was getting the right answers from God and hearing him correctly in my prayer time. So I started going to spiritual direction. I had my first session just a few weeks ago. And it was brilliant and life-giving, despite crying most of my way through it. But I also came out of it realizing that just like Habakkuk, I could be honest with God about my feelings. Before this spiritual direction, I found myself going to text friends or trusted people and saying, please, can you pray for me? This is happening. I'm really struggling, blah, blah, blah. And I've realized that actually God is asking me to pray for myself. God's asking me to bring my own feelings to him. I don't need to get other people to do it for me. Like, I can talk to him. So I started journaling. And whilst it's not kind of like something that's very natural to me, I have found it really helpful. And I've just begun by writing a few bullet points about my day or my week, just something that's happened. It doesn't have to be bad, it doesn't have to be good, just something. And then what my feelings are about those things that happened. And then I ask God what he has to say about those things. And sometimes he might answer me with what comes as a direct thought, and sometimes he might remind me of a scripture, and sometimes I go looking for scriptures that I feel are relevant to what I'm feeling and give truth and perspective to that situation. But overall, the Bible is honest. We read in the Bible about real people in the midst of real, incredible pain. And I think society tells us that we're broken if we feel pain. That something's wrong with us if we can't just pick ourselves up and pretend it's not happening. But healthy human beings feel pain. And the scriptures describe these negative emotions and encourage us to turn to God. And we call this lament. And in order to experience Christmas fully, we have to be willing to lament and to say something that something is not right or something is not as it should be. And there are actually 5 parts to lament, and we see this all throughout the Psalms. And firstly, it starts with an address of praise to God for who he is and for who he has been in the past. And then there's a complaint of distress, and we ask him, why is it like this? Then there is a protest for the innocence of the world, and we ask God why he's allowing these things to happen. And then we offer a prayer of deliverance, and we ask God to intervene and to do something. And lastly, and this is the key, we always finish with a declaration of confidence in God's faithfulness. And we say to him, God, you are able. The world is a broken place. And it all started with the fall of Adam and Eve, where Eve takes a bite from the forbidden fruit and Adam follows suit. I didn't mean to rhyme, but I did, sorry. But God has a plan, and he gives the world this tiny baby who changes lives, transforms people, and makes people new. And with Jesus, the world can be full of light and hope and faith. And it's not easy, it is painful, but with Jesus, life is better because of the hope that we have in him. And back then, in the pain, when the world is suffering, when there's no direct relationship with God because of Adam and Eve's sin, God enters in and he offers us hope because he came to make a way for us in the midst of all that is wrong. A light that shines in the darkness. You know, in that place, God does not stand idly by and just watches the world fall apart. He enters in the midst of all the mess, and he comes to Mary, a young girl from not a particularly spectacular family, doing not particularly spectacular things in a place that's not got really anything particularly spectacular happening in it. And God's people were under Roman occupation, and it's a disaster. And an angel shows up and tells this little girl, this young woman, that she's going to do something spectacular and be part of a spectacular story. He tells her that the hope that bearing the Christ child brings will be done through her. And then Mary sings a song of praise in Luke chapter 1. My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour, for he has been merciful, mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the mighty one has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their innermost thoughts, and he has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors. Mary is singing this while under Roman occupation, with no money and whilst being completely misunderstood. And she's about to become even more misunderstood as she has to explain to people, including her fiance, who is, without divine intervention, about to leave her, that because her story wasn't otherwise very believable, that God made her pregnant. He's brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He's filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors. In this, she's saying, even in the dark, a light is shining, and somehow, God, you have made a way for me. This is what Christmas is. Yes, the world is dark and it's painful, and there is addiction and suffering and ill health everywhere we look. But this story, we can see our own story. In the midst of all that's broken and messy in our lives, God's come for us, and there is a way to invite God into our lives so that the light of Christ can shine through us personally. And not just in our pain, but in our wrongdoings as well, in our mess-ups, that's shouting at our kids when they're being naughty and not listening, berating our husbands for not being more helpful, telling our wives that they need to do more, be more, and love more. There are the moments in all of these things, the snippets of Jesus shining through. And when on the day that I wrote this on Thursday, I'd been at work and I was on my own on the shop floor, and a man had walked past me at the tills, and I said hello as I normally do. And I asked if he was okay today, and he said, I'm a bit all over the place. I was like, what's the matter? And he said, my brain's not functioning very well. I was like, why is that? He said, I've had a headache for the last 3 days, and every now and then, whilst it's getting better, I just get this searing pain that comes through every now and then. And it's really uncomfortable. And I was like, that sounds really horrible. I'm actually a Christian. Can I pray for you? This is the first time I've done it whilst I've been working at Fat Face, and I've been there a year. I think it's just I've not had an opportunity to do so. And so it's quite fitting that it's happened just before this. But he replied with, oh, really? I'm also a Christian. Yes, please. So I prayed for him, and he went on his way. And then I got home, and I was tired. And whilst I put the girls to bed, I got really stressed and overwhelmed after a long week where I hadn't had much rest. Tom had been away. I'd been painting bedrooms. I'd just worked 6 hours on my feet, and I ended up shouting at the girls. And so I took myself away and left Tom to deal with them. And then I spent the next hour and a half probably berating myself for not being a good enough mother. How could my girls ever have a good relationship with me when they're older? How could I ever write a sermon about the hope of Jesus when I'm the very worst person in the world and constantly get everything wrong, let alone stand up here today and deliver it? But I know the answer. I can do all these things because God made a way for me. He came into my life and showed me how to love so deeply and unapologetically. He gave me room to be honest about my thoughts and my feelings. And he gave me the truth about who I am as his daughter. I'm not perfect, and it's okay. And as long as I love him and I keep looking to him, looking for his light in the darkness, I'll also be the light in the darkness for others. And I don't know if that man's headache went away, but I know that he left saying that he was now going to go outside with a hope that Jesus would heal him. And they were his exact words. I'm going to go outside now with a hope that Jesus is going to heal me. And I said, amen. I believe that too. And I'm reminded again that of how God can use me even in my brokenness and my weakness and my tiredness, that I can be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, and that by letting my light shine before others, they may see my good deeds and glorify God. Despite me, God can use me, and he will use me because of his grace for my shortcomings. He gives me hope that one day things will be right with the world, and there is joy in my heart because I know I am truly loved by him, even in the midst of my mess and my pain. And he can do that for you too. If you're able, can you please stand?